Hi, and welcome to Unprecedented Journey. I'm your host, Jeff Oppenheim, and I thank you for joining me today. Well, if you've tuned in before, you know that this is the place that all began out of, trying to put quarantine into a different perspective, and my own journey of trying to use this time, the time of the pandemic and quarantine, to be productive, to stay positive, mind, body, and spirit. And I know some of you have even said, this is going to be the time I write a book, my first book. Well, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who just published her first book. And yes, you're going to meet Elisabeth Oosterhoff, who wrote the book on happiness. No, I'm serious. She wrote the book on happiness. It's called The Many Faces of Happiness, Inspiring Stories on What Makes People Happy. Let me introduce you to Elisabeth right now. And let's get happy together.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Well, right away I have to ask you, what prompted you to write this book, The Many Faces of Happiness?
It was a sudden idea. It was 31 December 2009, and I was talking to a friend of mine about a New Year's resolutions. And suddenly I said to him, Alejandro, what do you think if every day in 2010 I interview one person about happiness? And he said, go for it. And that was the beginning of an amazing journey, and it turned out to be one of the best years of my life.
Well, at the beginning of your book, you interview a woman who I guess was an American but living and working in Bhutan. Talk about how that sets the tone for the book and your exploration in happiness.
Well, I had never heard about the gross national happiness concept before, which is a very interesting concept because it was a term that was coined by the King of Bhutan in 1972. He was at the airport and a journalist asked him, what is the gross national product of your country? And he replied, I'm not interested in the GNP of my country, but in the gross national happiness of my people. And in Bhutan, before a policy can be implemented, it has to be submitted to a GNH survey. So that was a very interesting concept that I learned. And I also heard her opinion about some of the happiness factors in Bhutan. And in her opinion, she mentioned that the sense of community and also to a certain extent simpler lives were a big factor for happiness of Bhutanese people.
There are so many wonderful essays in this, Elisabeth, but I think it's important to point out that you weren't just talking to friends. You actually did the unthinkable. You went up and approached complete strangers in different parts of the world and asked them to speak to you. Talk to us about that process.
I have learned that people, they like to talk about themselves. And also, if you show them a genuine interest, that you truly, truly listen to them, they will talk. And but it wasn't only a taking, it was also a giving. It was like a dance, because when they shared things with me, sometimes they were difficult things, and I could see that they were pained or that they had a hard time. I always tried to give them something in return to make them feel good.
What was one of your favorites?
I have a few that are very close to my heart. And I particularly remember this young African-American man. It was a rainy day in Barnes & Noble. He had dreadlocks. And we were sitting on the floor near the window. And he was describing to me one of the happiest moments in his life when he got his first kiss. And he was 13. It was behind the library it was behind the church in the Bronx. And it was the girl who took the initiative, and he was shocked. And I can still remember the words he used. He said, I can still recall the chilling of my spine, the sweating between my fingers, and the feeling of breathing for the first time. That was a very beautiful story. And I have so many. There was also the 90-year-old Sikh gentleman that still wanted to travel at his advanced age. And he recalled the moment he got rid of the turban and cut his own hair. And he told me, Elisabeth, I felt like a bird coming out of a cage. I felt free. And then I had she was one of my favorites, Jeannie. She was 84 years old. And she was telling me the stories of her two husbands. And she was telling me the story of the second husband, who was tall, who had a gruff voice. He owned a plane, and all the girls were crazy about him. And she told me about her first dinner date at his house. And she said to me, Elisabeth, of all things, he did serve organs, kidneys. And when she had asked her husband to be, why do you serve kidneys? And he had said to her, they heat women up. Kidneys heat women up. And there was the story of the homeless lady whose major source of happiness was when she could put a smile on somebody's face. There were so many stories, Jeff.
Was there any moment of unhappiness that this unearthed, either for the person you were questioning or for yourself, a little bit of melancholy?
There was shared sadness sometimes, but like they say in English, shared sadness is half a sadness, right? Well, that's not always the case, because I heard really sad stories. Like the people I interviewed, I called them happiness dates. And one of my happiness dates was a 16-year-old boy. And he said to me, we would not know what is happiness without unhappiness.
Well, I guess in some ways, some of it might have been discovery in all of us on happiness sometimes being a bit melancholy, like the story of the conductor who put his happiest moment in the future, the day I see my wife again, which was such a beautiful, short little essay about him remembering his late wife and their trips together, their time together, and how blessed he was, but really looking forward to the day he sees her again when they both go back home, as it were. So, very nice moments within the book.
Oh, my Lord. Each interview was special, let me tell you that first of all, because everybody shared their inner thoughts. They took time with me and they shared their thoughts. So in their own way, each interview was very special, which also made it very difficult to pick the right interviews.
It's hard for me to imagine, but did anyone say no to you?
One time, my altruistic intentions did not succeed. And that was on a Monday morning, 7 o'clock, on the New Jersey Transit train. And there was a somber-looking, sad-looking lady. And she immediately closed her eyes when she sat. And I said, shoot, there goes my chance. Then she opened it again quickly when the conductor came. And then she closed them again. But I said, she just opened the eyes. She cannot be sleeping now. So I nudged her a little bit. And I said, excuse me. And she looks at me very coldly. And I said, oh God, no. But I had started, so I could not go back. And I told her about my project, and she looked at me like, are you nuts? But I couldn't stop, so I said, what are 3 things that make you happy? And she said, my children, reading, and sleeping. And then she closed her eyes again. And I could tell you, Jeff, that I stopped there, but of course I did not. Because I wanted so badly this lady to be happy. So I asked her, how old are your kids? And she said, 16, 15, and 14. And then she closed her eyes, and then I stopped. So I learned my lesson.
Well, I know when I talk to a lot of writers, there's sometimes this critical moment when either the book clicks in or at some point they even say, I can't do this anymore. Was there a critical point for you in this process, and what was it?
Oh yes, there were many of them. As you can imagine, when you have been working on a book for a long, long time, there are times where you just feel like giving up. But then I had this driving force that said to me, no, Elisabeth, you cannot give up, because all these people, they shared with you their story. They gave me so much happiness, Jeff. And I felt that it was my duty to bring this happiness forward. I had to share their stories with the world, so that the world could also get to read their stories and get advice and get console and feel that they were not alone.
Do you have any advice on how we can keep happiness ever the more to the forefront every day?
Well, I learned a lot from my happiness dates, because, you know, the people I interviewed, I call them my happiness dates. And there are some principles that I try to apply, which is not always easy. And one is choose happiness above all. Fake it until you make it. And try to take the focus away from you onto others. And also to appreciate the small things in life.
I know there's an annual survey that lists the happiest countries in the world. And in that, I know that, of course, the Nordic countries rank at the top. The top 3 to 4 are always there. And usually it's Finland, I think, and Denmark, neck and neck there for first and second place. And then, of course, your birthplace, Norway, which I don't know if there's hard feelings this year because Switzerland, I guess it was, pushed you into
Yes.
fourth place.
Yes, that's
So
right.
is this cultural? Is happiness perhaps cultural?
In the same way that happiness is individual, I think that happiness has indeed a cultural aspect. Being Norwegian, I'm going to speak from my own experience. And for instance, for us Norwegians, it's very important to be in contact in nature. For us Norwegians, it's very important to be close to nature and also to be active.
One might say that happiness, well, that's a luxury right now. What's your thought?
And I would like to part on a quote from one of my happiness dates. He said, "To walk on water is not a miracle. To walk on earth is a miracle. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Seize it."
Well, Elisabeth, thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I'm feeling very happy.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you. And I look forward to maybe even hearing about the future projects or the happiness workbook, as it were. Thanks again. Stay tuned because we're going to hear from a variety of people reading different essays from the book. And it's such a joy to walk down these little paths with each of these people in their moments of happiness. So watch them back to back, binge watch, or put them aside for a day when maybe you're not feeling the happiest. We all are going through some incredible times right now, but if we do it together and we do it in the company of the many faces of happiness, I think we'll get through it. Until the next time, I'm Jeff Oppenheim for Unprecedented Journey. Stay safe, stay well, and you know what? Stay happy.